All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
Thank you all. Thank you for braving the elements and coming to this wonderful place that we arrive, and might I say we arrive punctually. One of the great things about Tony is that
Thanks, Tony.
He is so very punctual. I do love it.
Too many years in radio. The clock is more my boss than anything else, right?
Of the hour. Gotta hit it. We are a live show. We come to you from California, but we embrace all parts of this great nation. And by great nation, maybe a small G on great these days. We are, look, we've got a few problems, okay? Like every family, we have some problem members, and they have taken control of the kitchen. We hope temporarily. We'll get into that in greater detail. David Cay Johnston joins us today. The Pulizer Prize winner will be challenged to weigh in on the many things that are affecting America right now. The reckless abandon with which Doge, or Dodgy as some are calling it, Elon Musk's organization, running roughshod over government. We'll talk to David about that. Also, we will speak about several things that are, I would suggest, changing the face of American politics and the way of governance in America. I'll get to that with David Cay Johnston. May touch on it a bit in the first half hour. At the bottom of this hour, we have a visit with our doctor. Every good show should have a doctor, and we have a good doctor, a really good doctor. And Dr. David Daignault will be here to discuss the reemergence of bird flu, what's happening with the CDC, the WHO, how will this affect, particularly with regard to the CDC, the disposition toward an emerging, I'll just call it epidemic if the bird flu jumps, but it's likely to become a pandemic, meaning it will leave the shores of the U.S. What are the realities from a health perspective when it comes to that emerging threat? So we'll talk to the doctor about that. So David's second hour, bottom of this hour is a visit with the doctor. I did want to mention a couple of people sent me some pics from protests they were part of yesterday. There was quite the showing around the 50 states. This is in Benicia, California. This is from Vilma, one of our OGs, early adopter of the show when we came over from KGO Radio. This is Vilma's shot of the Benicia protest. You know, it's always easier to protest in California. Am I right, everyone? I mean, it's California. You know, you put on a jacket, you write up a sign. Don't get me wrong. It still is a great thing and takes a little oomph to make it happen. So I'm not diminishing it at all. I'm just saying it. When I look at the protests back east, they protested, I mean, in D.C., in New York, as I've said, in all of these cities back east, many of them cold weather cities. I think, man, that's commitment. You know, you're standing there, you're freezing your ass off, and you're holding a sign. It is just the beginning. MAGA Mars is weighing in early. He says, come on, Mark, there were barely 400 people in San Jose and only 6 in Cupertino, LOL. It is true. These movements start with very small numbers. I also think people are discouraged. I mean, MAGA Mars, you're encouraged because you're a MAGA faithful. You are believing in a new way forward, shining the light toward despotism and authoritarianism. You'll be fine. But it is indeed the case that these who see the future, small in number right now, perhaps, as they hit the streets, they will be a growing contingent, MAGA Mars, and you will have to deal with them. Now, but I'll be honest. I don't know that we can push this back. We'll talk to David Cay Johnston about that. I mean, you have to try. That's why I admire anybody making noise. You know something? Last thing about protests, because, you know, I am connected a lot with animal protests. You know, we are pretty cruel to animals worldwide. So, you know, it might be the elephants in India or Asia or, you know, in different parts of Asia. It might be the lab animals that are exploited and live in horrendous conditions, or it might be factory farmed animals. But oftentimes you just see a handful of protesters. I don't care if they're just a handful. I admire that they're making noise. You have to make noise. And there is a lot of noise out there, right? There are a lot of podcasts. There are a lot of different bloggers. There are many different Substacks. You have to make noise. Because there is so much other noise, you have to make noise. And you start, you know, with yourself. You start with yourself and your values, and then you find others who share those values, and you share a strategy for making noise. So again, I don't really focus on the numbers as much. I mean, the numbers are not insignificant, but they're also not predictive in any way of what may happen. I was at San Jose protest, says Uncle Scrooge. We have to fight. Hold the line. Thank you for the $5 super chat. Yeah, I agree. I mean, and I'll tell you something else. Even if there are only 5, 6, 10 people, 50 people, whatever, you meet each other, you talk, and as I say, you cook up additional strategies. You cook up the next one. That's how momentum builds, you know? So, Vietnam War demonstrations influenced the government, says Karen. Most certainly. Yeah, I mean, these demonstrations do. Now, that was an extraordinary series of events, but this is also an extraordinary series of events. So maybe that is a good parallel. Anyway, I wanted to also, Tony and I were talking before the show because there was some incredible video that's out. No, that's not what I wanted. You know, one thing, we've rearranged the studio, and so I'm kind of
We need less buttons
blind.
on that 360, man.
I'm kind of flying blind. I can't see them there. Yeah, thank you.
Mark Thompson Show.
Thank you very much. Now, one of the things Tony and I were speaking of was the videos that have emerged from this plane crash, and there were no fatalities in this plane crash, which is a remarkable thing, especially when you see this. Will you show this is the plane landing. Now, this is a plane, it was landing in, is it Toronto?
Toronto.
Yeah. Right, here it is. And you see the landing looks normal, but yeah, the plane bursts into flames and actually flips over.
Wings sheared right off, yeah.
Into the snow. It slides.
Tower, you're seeing this airplane just crash.
And so this was shot by a bystander, obviously, but I also wanted to show you what was happening inside the plane, and it was quite extraordinary to see this video. This next video is from inside the plane as people were evacuating at the Toronto airport. So the plane is upside down. And you can see passengers running out into the snow, and there's a shot back at the fuselage as it's ripped open.
They're still like shooting it with the fire retardant stuff too, or was water.
An incredible thing. So glad that the resulting accident had no fatalities associated with it, but that's the crash of that Delta flight and landing in Toronto. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
It's about time, MAGA Mars and all of you MAGA heads. I am excited, as are you, that your Lord and Savior, Donald Trump, will possibly get his own federal holiday, and it'll be on his birthday.
What?
I know. Well, when else are you going to have it? You can't have it on Christmas. That's Jesus' birthday. At least that's when we celebrate Jesus' birthday. This is part of a bill that has been introduced to make Donald Trump's birthday a federal holiday. It would happen in June. Hey, MAGA Mars, you're a big MAGA guy. Do you know what Donald Trump, your Lord and Savior's birthday is? What's Donald Trump's birthday, MAGA Mars? And if they're going to throw you out of MAGA land, man, if you don't know the answer to that. Let me help you so that when you're at the meeting, you don't get embarrassed. His birthday is June 14th, and they want to make it a public holiday.
I've never seen anything like it.
I know. Representative Claudia Tenney unveiling a bill to designate Trump's birthday, Flag Day, as a public holiday. So in other words, it is Flag Day already. And now you could take Flag Day, fold it into Trump's birthday, and you could celebrate a federal holiday. I like her style, Representative Claudia Tenney. It's sort of like, you think you can kiss the president's ass? Let me show you how to kiss the president's ass. I'm going to introduce a federal holiday on his birthday. So no word yet as to, here are all of the June holidays that
I had to look it up.
Tony had to Google it.
Google it.
There it is. It's National Egg Day in June on the 3rd. National Donut Day really doesn't feel as though it should have to exist. I don't know that National Egg Day has to exist. National Yo-Yo Day is the 6th. National Best Friends Day. This is all, well, these are all, I don't think these are official holidays that were voted
I don't know. This is what I can find real fast. It has Flag Day. That makes it somewhat reputable.
Father's Day is the 3rd Sunday, the 16th. National Sewing Machine Day is the 13th of June.
What?
I know.
There you go. The 17th you'd like. Eat all your veggies day.
The 17th is Eat All Your Veggies Day. Yeah, come on, baby. World Juggling Day is the 18th. So you can see his birthday and the new national holiday would be surrounded by some very cool national days as well. As I say, World Juggling Day, and then Father's Day is International Picnic Day, World Refugee Day. It's funny how there are significant days that are wrapped in a bunch of frivolous days, right? National Kissing Day is the 22nd. Runner's Selfie Day. I don't know where this came from, but it strikes me as...
First thing I found on the internet.
National Sunglasses Day is the 27th. Really? I don't know that these are all... okay, anyway, his birthday would be falling on what is a legit day called Flag Day, and the congressperson said on the floor, "Today I introduced legislation to designate Trump's birthday and Flag Day as a federal holiday, ensuring President Trump's contributions to America's greatness are forever enshrined into law." They really are crawling so far up Donald Trump's rear that I am surprised he is able to walk. Pretty incredible. It's all part of reframing and recharacterizing and reshaping various things in America to conform with either a Trumpian kind of, what would you call that? It's more than an adherence to what he believes. It's occultism, really. But it's a reverence and a worship, probably is the word I would look for. They want to reshape that kind of a nationalism / Trumpism. And so they proposed this bill. There are also bills that were introduced last week to rename Greenland Red, White, and Blue Land. Now, I know you're thinking, no, you made that up. No, that's really what they want to do as President Trump seeks to acquire Greenland. That's underway. But watch for it. We will report on it when it happens. June 14th may be a new federal holiday in America, Trump's birthday. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
yeah. The other thing I wanted to mention to you is related to Social Security. You saw that the head of Social Security, Michelle King is her name, she has stepped down over access that DOJ has gained into recipient information. So, you know, they're already into the IRS. This is a treasure trove of information. You could say some of the most sacrosanct information about Americans, about how much we paid. Well, look how Donald Trump protected his own tax returns. He didn't want us to know what or when or if he paid taxes, right? And you can imagine that that kind of concern about privacy is shared by many Americans and many American businesses. Now you get into the Social Security Administration, and there is a tremendous amount of sensitive information that is collected there. But DOJ is now investigating and well on their way to infesting the Social Security Administration the same way that they did the IRS. So the acting commissioner has stepped down from her role. Michelle King is leaving. She's been there for 30 years. She originally, and it's so nice to see this occasionally, of course it takes a woman to do it, to push back on DOJ staffers. They wanted access to sensitive information, and she said no. The White House has replaced her with Leland Dudick, who is working at the Social Security Administration already. And the White House spokesperson, Harrison Fields, released a statement after Michelle King stepped down and away from the Social Security Administration, saying President Trump has nominated the highly qualified and talented Frank Bisognano to lead the Social Security Administration, and we expect him to be swiftly confirmed in the coming weeks. In the meantime, the agency will now be led by a career Social Security anti-fraud expert as the acting commissioner. President Trump is committed to appointing the best and most qualified individuals who are dedicated to working on behalf of the American people. This is just one of several departures of high-ranking officials concerned about these DOJ staffers entering private areas of government information where taxpayer information is kept, where Social Security information is kept. Again, mad respect for Michelle King. They've accessed the Treasury payment systems, as you know, been widely reported. We talk about it a lot here. And now they are into the IRS databases. Since Trump has retaken the White House, Musk has burrowed deep into all of these federal agencies. There's been no public scrutiny of his work. As you know, he makes a big deal about the transparency and how everything's transparent. No, it's not. Just the opposite. I mean, this really is Oppositeville. They talk about how transparent everything is. It's just the opposite. It's completely opaque. You can't see what they're doing. They talk about how honest everything is and how about apolitical everything is. It's actually just the opposite. It's completely dishonest, it's full of corruption, and it's completely political. So we look at this stuff, and it's astounding to me. It's astounding to me that we've really turned the keys of government over to a guy who wasn't elected, and he hasn't even been vetted. He went through no confirmation process. And it's extraordinary that Elon Musk, this billionaire guy, richest guy in the world, has access to all this information. Now, just because I mentioned it, I'll also touch on something that we have mentioned before. I haven't really gotten into it in a super deep way, but I'll just mention it here again and note it because as you look at all of the different cross currents coming together, I think this is one that's worth keeping in mind. Donald Trump is the president, and he became president because of a coalition. You know, I mean, this is really the way people rise to power. Different interest groups see their interests most, I'll put it this way, best served by whatever candidate they then vote for. They may be single issue people like abortion. We know that the Christian right feels strongly about that, or it might be, again, in the case of the Christian right, it might be about getting God back in schools. It might be DEI. These are all fair things to vote on, but they're slightly different, as you can see. And then on the left, it might be similarly the inclusion of those who are not really normally getting a place at the political table. It might be DEI, but it might be freedom of the press. It might be any number of things that you feel are best served. It might be the other side of the question of women's reproductive freedoms. These are things that you feel, hey, this is a single issue that I vote on. It might be the environment. These things, but I mention it because these coalitions come together to elect a president. So there's a transactional aspect to Donald Trump that has been a little more obvious than we would see in past political struggles. So you've really seen the Christian right move in and really be paid off with Supreme Court appointments, etc. What you've seen in Musk, and this is why I mention this, what you see in Musk and you see in the Trump administration is the rise of this Project 2025. The Project 2025 that Trump said he had no idea about. I have no idea. I don't know what it is. People keep talking about it. I don't know what it is. Of course, that was a lie. He does know exactly what it is. In fact, he's put in power in his administration those that were the very authors of Project 2025, not just little footnote authors. I mean, really the muscle behind Project 2025. Russell Vogt, who I've spoken of at length here, he is running Office of Management and Budget. He is maybe the lead author of Project 2025. So why is Musk so involved with the government the way he is? I'd suggest to you it's another sort of transaction. Trump doesn't really care about government. He doesn't really care about a lot of the X's and O's. He's the Greenland guy, the tariff thing, the Gulf of America thing. He, I think, has an old worldview, an uninformed worldview, a shallow worldview. He's ready to pay off, as you know, any number of ways, the jackpot of legislation and permits when it comes to drilling, when it comes to any number of special interests that are associated with oil and energy concerns, with the lobbyists who infest Washington. And by the way, I say infest Washington, that's not fair. I mean, we all need our interest lobbied for in Washington. So they're evil lobbyists, or they're lobbying for things that we might view as evil. And then there are righteous lobbyists that we might think are righteous. But I'd suggest to you, in the Trump administration, there are all evil lobbyists. I'm just going to say that's my bias. But what we're really seeing now with Elon Musk is a takeover of government on a scale we've never seen before. There is no check on this guy. There is no president ever who has just appointed someone to go through government the way he is currently invading government and begin firing people, begin dismantling government agencies. It's extraordinary. It was talked about in Project 2025. But what you've got in Elon is you have the marriage of political agenda and tech savvy and know-how. So he goes in there with his crew of SEAL Team 6 computer experts, and they can and have gotten the private information of so many Americans. It leads to leverage. Elon Musk, I'd suggest to you, has already collected the kind of leverage over government that may prevent us from pushing back on him in any legitimate way. Meaning, if all of a sudden Congress wakes up out of this Rip Van Winkle slumber and they decide to try to take the reins of government again, I don't know that they can. I really see Musk as a horribly destructive figure. He doesn't have the best interests of America as a priority. In fact, I'd suggest that if he really had any kind of efficiencies underpinning his strategies, he wouldn't have gone after the agencies he goes after. You're going after the Social Security Administration? They're one of the most efficient administrations in Washington. You're going after the IRS? The IRS, same thing. There's no waste and abuse in the IRS in any kind of way that matters. I mean, I'm sure you can go anywhere in Washington and find waste and abuse, but the IRS generates money. That is the source of revenue. And what we've seen, we saw it in the last Trump presidency, and now we're going to see it in a big, big way in this Trump presidency, is you've seen the dismantling of the IRS at the highest levels, the levels that affect white-collar criminals, that affect billionaires who are taxed. So you're seeing fewer and fewer of those IRS officials occupying those parts of the IRS that would affect Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and his high net worth friends. This is the oligarchical structure of America. And by the way, that's been there for a while, but now you're seeing it in an even more naked way. But the notion that you could chop at the IRS, that only serves the most wealthy Americans, and it will hobble your ability to balance the budget, bring in revenue. I mean, that's where revenue comes from in large measure. So Elon's crew is very dangerous. And the last thing I'll say about Elon Musk, just as a kind of an overview, and I'd love to get this into this more, and I'll touch on it with David Cay Johnston when he gets here, but I'd like to get into it more as we watch the weeks unfold, because it's all happening very quickly. There is another plan, and it is that Curtis Yarvin plan for monarchical rule. And I've mentioned it to you before. Curtis Yarvin is sort of this intellectual dude who's got this view of the CEO should be running America. It's monarchical. He's a monarchist. But his the way he cloaks his monarchical views is in this CEO argument, so that America should be run by a CEO because CEOs handle things efficiently. CEOs can get America from here to there without all the waste and abuse. And he uses the example of, you know, if you had to have America in the government design an iPhone, it would never get designed. It would go for decades, et cetera. Yeah, that's not what America does. That's not what the government is about. And by the way, that's also not true. If you look at the CDC, if you look at NASA, there have been huge scientific breakthroughs here in this country. NIH, I know these are all sort of now being played off as the enemy. They're an extraordinary number of things that have happened scientifically and from an evolutionary standpoint, I'm talking about it with government and legislatively, that have happened in the United States of America. So the idea somehow that America can't get anything right and government is, it needs to be traded out so that you have a CEO running things. And by the way, it doesn't stop there. The true musings or rants of Curtis Yarvin, and Curtis Yarvin is kind of their North Star. People like Musk, that whole crew that comes out of technology that has now really taken over America and taken over Trump's world, they have much darker plans for the rest of us. So I would watch this, because this guy Elon Musk isn't some misguided dude who's just cutting where he shouldn't. He has a much darker vision in place for full takeover. I think they view Trump as the useful idiot. He has a lot of charisma. I don't think they'll get rid of Trump, because Trump is so worshipped by people like in our chat. You know, the MAGA heads who are in our chat, they love and worship Trump because he says what we're all thinking. He hates the same stuff that I do. He knows America's on the wrong course, and he wants to get out there, and he is finally making us proud to be Americans, or whatever their view is. And it's a very male energy about Trump that a lot of people are attracted to. So my point is, as long as he has that hold on America, as long as he has that hold on the electorate, as long as he has that hold on Congress, Trump is extremely valuable to them. But the larger vision for them doesn't involve Donald Trump, and that should concern all of us. So I've got an appointment for us with the doctor in just a moment. So let me quickly address anything. I can't. This is what Kim's not here, as you know. It's just Tony and myself, so I have to watch the chat. And Tony's kind of watching the chat for me.
I'm also trying to talk to Dark right now. He's having some audio issues we're trying to sort out. So,
okay. Let's see. Maggie says, I don't deserve to be treated like this and worry that my lifeline Social Security check will be halted because I am a Democrat. I don't know if you really have to worry, Maggie. To be frank, I would need to know more. I don't know that we're going to get to that point. I mean, in our lifetime, maybe over the long haul. I don't know how old you are. I don't know. But let me just make the general point beyond you, beyond me. It's a decent question. We've always seen what's going to happen here to Maggie is they're going to try to privatize Social Security in certain ways. They're going to begin to change it. There's going to try to almost a sleight of hand, I would guess, with Social Security. So I would encourage you to not be super anxious about this, at least in the short to medium term. I hope that that's right and that you'll be fine. Dennis says, spot on, Mark. Thiel is hijacking Trump. Yeah, Thiel is the guy who is the Yarvinist. He's the guy who believes a lot of what I've just described. And Thiel is the guy who created J.D. Vance. He hired J.D. Vance. He put him in the Senate, dumped $15 million in his Senate campaign, got him to the Senate, and now J.D. Vance, his guy, is singing from that hymnal as the Vice President of the United States. Deirdre Lozica says the IRS collects over $5 trillion in taxes each year, and he wants to gut it? Make it make sense. Brian says we must be part of the resistance, people. Get involved with the resistance group. They are out there now. Yarvin is extremely dark, says Pietro, and the philosophical guide for JD and the rest of them. That's exactly right. It's not about waste and abuse, says Rick S. It's about decades of the super rich not paying enough taxes percentage-wise. It seemed like such a simple pitch and such a clean pitch to make the billionaires pay their share. Like, how could that possibly not be something that Americans spark to? I believe that was, look, there were a lot of mistakes made, and I don't know that you could have pushed back on Trump. I think he, as I've mentioned to you before, is a generational political figure. He has that, you may not want to admit it, but he has that charisma, and he does tap into the public consciousness, on the zeitgeist. On some level, he is very good with that. Of course, he also is not bound by the truth. So he's able to make stuff up. This is worse than it's ever been. That is worse than it's ever been. I can't believe these people are coming in numbers, and they're coming from the prisons, and they're coming from, I mean, he's taking stuff and making it up or ginning it up, you know, like amplifying it. So it becomes a far more threatening thing. He takes constituencies in America and he creates a hatred around them, a threat around them. I mean, the trans community, for example. And so this is his, if you want to call it evil power, but he's very, very good. Trump is very, very good at that. Now, he doesn't know how to govern at all. I mean, look at him. And he doesn't want to govern. That's the beauty of this for Elon Musk. He's sitting there in the Oval Office. He signs a bunch of stuff. They explain what it is. Yeah, he's got this tariff thing, and that's going to create all kinds of issues and economic hardship. But then he wants to go play golf. And Elon Musk is in there doing the real heavy lifting, which is associated with dismantling government. I mean, why would you go after USAID? Think about it. It's such an infinitesimal part of U.S. expenditures. You do it because of personal grievance. USAID looking into Musk's use of Starlink and turning it off during the Ukraine-Russia showdown. All of those things are played out at different agencies. Same thing with EPA, who was fining Musk for his destruction of fragile habitats when he was using his rockets. A lot of these rockets have to be blown up in midair. They're not all successful launches. Those run afoul of the FAA. What did he do with the FAA? He fired the guy in charge of the FAA, and he's cut the FAA staff substantially. And the last thing I will say, do you have the doctor's audio working now, Tony? Okay, I'll just make this last point. You have him? Yeah,
he's there.
okay.
Yeah, he says he's hearing everything low, so I don't know. It's a StreamYard problem he's having, but we can get by, I think.
Okay, so I'll get to our guest in just a second. I was kind of just expanding because I knew we were waiting for him. And now I've forgotten what I was going to say, so it's not... That's the beauty of an extemporaneous exchange, everyone. So
The Mark Thompson Show.
I like to visit with a medical professional from time to time. What's the problem now, Tony?
He just dropped out. He's going to be right back.
Oh, my God. This is unbelievable.
Thanks, Tony.
This is incredible. I'll tell you to smash the like button while you're here.
Smash it with your iron rod.
Smash it with your iron rod. Smash it like a boss.
Smash it with your iron rod.
Yes.
Like and subscribe. We're almost there.
Oh, like and subscribe. Yeah, this is extraordinary. I guess we're approaching 100,000 subscribers. Is that true?
Yep.
Wow.
Get Marcus plaque, damn it.
Wow. This is
Get a little plaque.
extraordinary. I guess they give you a plaque, when you get to...
with 100,000 and then a million. So there's a bit of a gap.
This is... yeah. Anyway, we're very excited about that potentially happening. And I have way more about what's happening in America. David Cay Johnston joins us top of the hour right now. As I say, I like to visit with a medical professional regularly, and we have our own on this show. That's right. Haven't really road tested whether he can write prescriptions yet. We haven't gotten to that part of the that exchange. So I see him now. How about it for Dr. Michael Daignault, everyone? Come on. I guess there was quite the effort to get you today. So I'm glad you made it.
Having some audio difficulties, but I got a Bluetooth to my hearing aids now, so it should be much better.
Okay. All right. You sound great, and I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, great.
So I want to start with the emerging threat of the bird flu. It's certainly emerging. How big a threat is it?
Well, since we talked 2 weeks ago, they've identified another strain of this. It's the H5N9 strain. The one have been talking about is H5N1. And so now this is a new strain. And this is, as I suggested you 2 weeks ago, every time this virus gets a chance to replicate, it's going to reassort its genome to adapt to the situation. And, this particular strain is of concern. And you look at the largest, one of the largest egg farms in the country in Indiana right now, they've had to kill 13 million chickens just to protect against this, even with all their biosecurity protocols in place. And so, you're wondering why the price of eggs keeps going up. I mean, that's the main thing that has to be tackled. And so, as you and I discussed offline, I was a little hopeful that President Trump actually maintained the Office of Pandemic Preparedness and actually wants to appoint a veterinarian to that job. And so I think that's really prescient. I mean, that's what we need right now is honestly a veterinarian with global health experience.
Did you see that he is doing that? I mean, he is going to make that appointment?
Yeah, I mean, we saw that.
It was, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we saw that there was that news announcement on CBS. I'm not sure with this office if it has to go through actual approval from Congress, like the health secretary or like the CDC director or FDA. But as far as we know, I didn't hear differently. So hopefully, yes.
I wanted to get to, I don't know. Thank you, William, for that super sticker. I wanted to get to some other stuff besides bird flu. But before I do, you mentioned the mutation and the way that these viruses change, and we all feel as though we've gotten a sort of an ongoing class in that, the way we've seen COVID change, and when we see the seasonal flu change as well, right? Those are mutations of an existing flu. Is there any way to ever get out in front of this stuff? Is that what they're talking about with gain of function and all of that? You know, the controversy associated with trying to manipulate these viruses in a lab. Give us some perspective on how you get in front of a mutation.
No, it's a good point. I mean, I think, when you look at COVID, for example, and we were tracking variant to variant, and, we would plan to roll out a particular vaccine to cover what we thought were going to be the more prevalent strains. And then 3 months later, it had already changed by the time we rolled out the vaccine. And we saw more quickly, that reassortment of the genome with COVID. And it was so difficult to keep up, even with the mRNA vaccine platform, that makes it just so difficult. I mean, it makes it so easy to update the vaccines. And so, it depends. I mean, I think COVID replicates and changes very quickly. The flu virus changes every season. But then if you look at something like measles, where you get 2 shots when you're 12 to 15 months, and then another shot when you're 4 to 6, and that's 99% for 99% of adults, that's lifetime immunity. So
yeah, that really is extraordinary. It puts it into a kind of framework that I can get my head around, which is that,
right.
I mean, we have to be reminded the vaccines aren't all the same, the viruses aren't all the same, the pathogens aren't all the same. These are all very specific. That's why I hate aspects of the anti-vax movement, because the pushback against vaccines has been so extraordinary and so successful that we now have a measles outbreak. I mean, an honest-to-God measles outbreak in Texas, in this community that has not been vaccinated.
Yeah, it was that in West Texas, and it was particularly among a Mennonite population there. And I did some research because I didn't really know much about the Mennonite religion, and I was wondering if there was something in their doctrine that advises against vaccines, and there's not. This was clearly a decision by the community to just not get vaccinated. And the other thing to remember about measles is herd immunity. If 95% of people have the vaccine for measles, you're going to protect even those that aren't vaccinated. But when that number dips below 95, those that aren't vaccinated, those who aren't yet vaccinated, so you talk about an infant who's 6 months old, they're going to be at risk to measles when the herd immunity drops below 95%. And I think that's what we're seeing here. And measles has a really high fatality rate, 15.2% for those under 5%, and even those under 5 years old. And even survivors, 30% end up with long-term brain inflammation, encephalitis, deafness, blindness. It's really tragic. And I sent the chart to your producers. I wanted to see if we could get it up on screen here at some point, just to compare, like you were saying, across different infectious diseases that we've been talking about in the news, just to sort of give you an idea of how much more infectious and contagious measles is.
Did we get that? Did you get it, Tony, or not? Maybe we don't have it, or do you don't have it?
It wasn't sent to me.
I'll try to.
Sorry.
But yeah, that's the problem. We have different people working. I'm going to send it to you now, maybe, and you'll be able to, if I can find it. Give me just 20 seconds. This is the live show as we. I don't see it either. It might have been sent to Kim.
Oh yeah. Do you want me to? Let me see if I can resend it to you right now.
Yeah, but I also have. What did I give you, Tony? I gave you something on. What did I give you? I gave you something also related to vaccines, I believe. I did want to ask you, and it's worth noting, we're getting some feedback in the chat. Tuberculosis outbreaks. Apparently, I mean, there has been. Oh, and here we got. Before I get to tuberculosis, I got this in after hours commenting. A lot of people watch our show in delay, and so they'll leave comments, and we go through and we really do read everybody's comments. And that's just a note to all of our viewers and listeners. But this is on YouTube when I say the comments. Harry, my hero, says some vaccines are helpful and necessary, but it is insane to require a newborn to get 61 shots in the first months. Now, I did a little research, and I didn't see 61 shots for any newborn. So that is a total load of shit right away.
You're right.
Now you can tell me, though, that's typically done, right? People see that and go, yeah, wow, that doesn't make any sense. Man, the medical, like, no one really does the follow-up to see how completely full of BS that information is. Speak to the vaccine schedule. I don't want to get into a whole vax thing, but then this is how we end up with a TB outbreak, a measles outbreak, because I think the information is getting all scrambled.
Yeah, and actually, Mark, I just sent you that chart.
Yes,
See
I'm
if you
going to
can
send
bring
it
it
on
up.
to, I'll send it on to Tony. Good.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're 100% right. It's not 61 shots over the course of, a few months. And I think that's exactly the kind of, misinformation that gets sent on a tweet and everybody jumps on, like you said, without doing any of their own research. And so, a lot of these things are spread out over the first couple years of a child's life. And even, to take the measles one as an example, the first shot at 12 to 15 months provides almost 97% protection. And that second one just brings you to 99. So, even just one can do so much to provide almost lifetime immunization against a very deadly virus. And, a lot of people have said, well, I've had my two when I was a kid. Do I need a third? And so it's a really good question, but only less than 1% of people ever need a third measles shot. And that's people who are immune compromised, people suffering from cancer, on chemo. If they want to check their titers, you ask your doctor to check your IgG, your immunoglobulin G level for measles, and that'll give you a sense of whether you're still protected. But for most people, 99%, two shots are good.
This brings up a really important question then, because with the measles outbreak, and we are going to put the chart up, there it is, measles, influenza, tuberculosis, COVID-19, the Omicron.
Yep.
Take us through this chart, but I want to get to, okay, there's an outbreak of measles, fewer and fewer people are getting vaccinated, et cetera. How vulnerable am I if I had that measles vaccine back when I was a kid?
Right. So for most people, probably 99% of people, if you've had your two shots, this is not a threat to you. But if you just to compare across the different diseases we've been talking about that are in the news lately. So I created this chart just to show you how contagious measles is. So in a room of 10 people who are not vaccinated, kids, adults, you put somebody with measles, active measles in there, 10 out of 10 are going to get it. Because
Wow.
it's called the R naught, and that's the reproductive factor that we use to compare how infectious diseases are. And that's because the measles virus stays in the air so much longer than, say, COVID or flu. And so that's why it's so contagious. So 10 out of 10 are going to get it. But then if you look, for influenza, it's less than 2. For tuberculosis, it's also less than 2, because the COVID virus the flu virus, the tuberculosis bacteria, the COVID virus, they are airborne, but they're a little bit heavier. And so they won't stay in the air as long. They'll drop to the ground. But because measles is technically lighter, stays airborne for a longer period of time, even after somebody has left the room. And it just shows you how much more contagious these are. And that's why that 95% herd immunity is so important, especially for measles.
And so as the bird flu emerges, we need to likely vaccinate against it. There would be a vaccine against contracting bird flu. Where does bird flu, of course, this is impossible for you to answer this question probably because it has yet to manifest, I think, in any kind of way that can really be studied in the human population, but maybe you can still take a shot at it. How contagious, in that chart of contagions and contagiousness, how contagious is the bird flu potentially?
Right. So we don't, as of now, have any evidence that there's been human to human spread. Right. That's like the key point to make. All of the infections that we know in humans from bird flu are from, wild birds or people working in livestock. And that's why in our ER, we started screening people with anybody with flu-like symptoms. One question: do you work in livestock? Just to make sure we don't those individuals don't get past the safety net of the ER. But to answer your question again, what was concerning in this one case of somebody who got bird flu in Louisiana that got very sick was that during the course of this patient's illness, the virus mutated within him, because as you're sick, the virus is replicating. That's what's causing your symptoms. And the mutations that researchers saw in this particular patient showed that the virus had adapted to infect the upper airways of humans. That to me is really scary. And as I mentioned to you before, what we don't want is for a livestock worker to have regular seasonal flu because they didn't get vaccinated, contract bird flu from their job. The two viruses intermingle within that person, in that patient while they're sick, and create a bird flu that's then human to human transmissible.
Wow.
That's
I mean,
what we don't want.
yeah, that sounds like a Stephen King novel kind of horror. Yeah.
No, that would be literally patient zero right there. And as I mentioned to you 2 weeks ago, we have vaccines stockpiled, particularly for avian flu, because we were worried about this happening in the future. And as I mentioned to you, I think it would be such a great public health gesture to try to vaccinate as many livestock workers as possible, just to protect them and stop the virus in its track, keep it from becoming human to human.
Seems like such an easy plan to implement, such a simple plan. I don't understand why that isn't already happening. When you deal in so many different environments, I mean, in workspace, you take all kinds of other precautions. I mean, there's special precautions that are prescribed, if I can use the word, for that. It's not always medical, but prescribed for those workers. That makes total sense. Take me back to the breakout of TB. I think it's in Oklahoma where it's happening.
Yeah, so right now there's about 67 patients that they're tracking with active TB and 79 with latent TB. So the difference is active TB, you were infected and you have the disease. Latent tuberculosis, you were infected, but you don't actually have the disease. You're not showing any symptoms. The treatment for TB, it's because it's bacteria, there's 4 antibiotics. It's a 6-month regimen of antibiotics. It's not a walk in the park at all. Fortunately, in this case, in Kansas right now, in Kansas City, Kansas, there's no cases of MDR TB, multi-drug resistant TB. That's what we don't want. And actually, a couple years ago in Kansas, they did have an outbreak of MDR TB. So again, to go back to your earlier question about measles, like how susceptible is the general population there to TB? It's very unlikely. We usually see TB in people that are immune compromised, people who have, HIV, AIDS, other immune suppressing diseases, because TB is an opportunistic infection, meaning that it's only going to take advantage of immune systems that are compromised. So the risk for the general public is low, but for people that live in close-knit settings, rehab facilities, nursing homes, prisons, even you talk about military barracks. I mean, something like TB could be an issue. And the symptoms are cough, coughing up blood, night sweats, unintentional weight loss. It's just shocking to see a TB outbreak in this day and age. I mean, this is a scourge of the ancient world, essentially. And the good thing, though, that even though there's this CDC national blackout of sharing of public health information, I've seen that the states are still doing a great job of reporting what's going on. So, kudos to the Kansas State Public Health Authority for keeping us up to date. And also the American Medical Association continues to put out updates on bird flu, TB, and measles. So it's great to see these public health leaders like stepping up and still talking about what's going on, sharing information in the absence of, the federal government putting out enough information right now.
That is encouraging. I think I said Oklahoma. It's Kansas,
Kansas.
Right over the border. And now, lastly, the global cut in funding for healthcare, in funding for so much that has, I think, put us on the cutting edge of so many breakthroughs from a health standpoint. One of the great things I think about technology is the way in which the world has come together. We saw it. And the WHO, I also thought was and we could talk about this, I'm curious. I mean, it was dominated by China without question. And it was full of money and moneyed interests, okay? Basically China and the US, okay? We were the other big moneyed interest, and they can dictate policy. But that said, there is a clearinghouse of information, and there is a collaboration worldwide that we saw during the pandemic that I felt was such a great aspect of technologies in this, to use your words, day and age. I wonder if you can speak to changes in that collaborative effort, given the cutback in funding at the WHO, at the CDC, and worldwide, the disposition toward the U.S. because of all of these changes.
Well, two big points to make there. I was a Peace Corps volunteer back in 2003, and President Bush started PEPFAR, which was the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. And it was like the largest global health program ever. It was $110 billion that we spent. 25 million lives have been saved with antiretroviral therapy that we provided to developing countries in sub-Saharan Africa, the Caribbean, South America, and Asia. And when I was a Peace Corps volunteer, we used a lot of that funding to set up HIV testing and treatment clinics around the West Indies islands where I was working. And, it was such an effective program. So many people depend on that for their treatment. PEPFAR was like President Bush's probably one of his greatest achievements that he was able to do. And so, to see that funding cut is just heartbreaking for me personally. And then to answer your question about, global collaboration, when COVID broke out and we didn't know what was going on, it was literally us talking to ER colleagues in Italy who experienced this firsthand, and then again in New York, just to say, across Twitter or just text message, what are you doing to treat COVID patients? What's working, what's not working? And so, with technology, we will still, those of us on the front line will find a way to do what we need to do to share information and help patients. But that was just a great collaborative effort that just sprung up spontaneously. And, hopefully we won't have to do it again, but
no, I mean, but there will be world health challenges. I mean, there will be other pandemics. I mean, it's inevitable. Sure. There have been through time. And so the instruments to fight those pandemics have evolved in all of these exciting, positive ways. And you've talked about this collaborative effort. And so I really am a bit anxious about the changes, at least in this country, but I'm encouraged by what you've just said. I want to, before I let you go, I want to take a couple of questions that have come in, and I think you'll appreciate them. Please ask, says D. Elliott, how we can protect ourselves. I'm chuckling because I don't know, protect yourself from what? There's so many different threats.
Probably bird flu.
Yeah, bird flu. Go ahead.
You just, the patient that got really sick in Louisiana, there was like a sick duck in their backyard. So any kind of wild ducks, I would just stay away from in general, especially because this new strain, the H5N9, it was on a duck farm in California that they found that new strain. And so, like, it's just common sense, like any kind of wild ducks or birds that fall in your yards that appear ill, like just stay away from. If you work in the livestock industry, make sure to ask where you're working, what kind of biosecurity things are in place, how you can protect yourself. Obviously, if you have flu-like symptoms and you work in that industry, you want to get checked out. You want to go to the nearest ER, and so we can test you and just get you on the public health radar, just to make sure any of these patients are not falling through the net. But another big thing is don't drink raw milk. I can't believe I have to continue to say this, but raw milk's not pasteurized. It's not gonna. You can't be certain that bird flu is not going to be in raw milk at this point. But pasteurized milk, from what we've seen, the high temperature does kill bird flu. Regular milk is safe to drink. But I would say that's probably the big thing. Any kind of like raw dairy products, you got to be careful.
I have 2 chickens, says Wes, in my backyard that we let loose. Are they safe? He wants to know.
Yeah, that's a good point because again, a lot of the wild birds, if they're nesting or they're coming onto your grounds or where you live, and their feces can get into the soil, it can get into the bird feed for your chickens. So I think you have to be careful. May not want to let chickens on your yard run wild, just of what's going on right now, especially in California. We're like on a migratory route for a lot of these wild birds.
The vaccine, says Grimjer, the vaccine protocol has been so effective for decades that we have forgotten the horror of what it's like to have these diseases spreading through our communities. I suppose you'd agree with that without question. Right, doctor?
Yeah, and I think, a lot of people nowadays just don't remember or have relatives that had polio. I think that's where we're starting to lose the plot a little bit.
As many as 13, this is a wild one. I don't know. This will be fun, though. Rich says as many as 13 viruses have been discovered in the permafrost. While the threat of zombie viruses is real, some scientists say there are still many unknowns about how they could affect humans. These zombie viruses that are in the permafrost, that are being unleashed, it's not, now this is just me, it's not wrong, right, doctor? I mean, that is a real thing, yes?
Viruses in the permafrost. Yeah, I mean, a lot of if you look at, I mean, I'm not an expert in this. I just read a lot. If you think about like astrobiology, a lot of, bacteria and viruses, maybe have come to Earth millennia ago on the backs of asteroids and comets and then get frozen in the permafrost. Yeah, that's true. But then you have to think about what is going to be the vector to actually carry those viruses to the general population if they're just defrosting in the ice. And so, I think the risk is pretty low unless somebody, finds the virus in the permafrost and it figures out how to weaponize it.
That
I mean,
is what
again,
Phineas is saying. Phineas says Putin and China are going to weaponize the permafrost
there we
viruses,
go.
doctor. I'm glad you could come here and get the truth from Phineas.
Yeah. We're getting into we're creating some good ideas for movies here, I think.
Yeah, this is, I'm telling you, this is very Stephen King. I love our conversations. I thank you for being a regular visitor. Do you have any place if people want to sort of be in touch with you? You can reach us here on the show, and I'll ask the doctor, but you can reach us at the Mark Thompson Show at gmail.com. But you can follow Dr. Michael Daignault. Where can they follow you, doctor?
Yeah, I just use Instagram. It's dr.daignault, dr.daignault, and that's primarily for public health. I post a lot of reels on, latest news. Recently it was, why this flu season is so bad, and then we talked about the LA fires, how the air quality has been affected as well. So I'm happy to take questions on there as well. And on Fox 11, we do a medical roundup every week, and we have an Ask the Doc section. So if anybody's got some burning health or wellness questions, I'm also happy to answer those on air there.
That's in Los Angeles for those who are
Yes.
who are in LA. I just got last week. I got the flu virus shot, and I got the COVID shot. And when I was talking to a nurse, she said, "Wow, that's really late to get it." And then I said, "Yeah, I know. I just thought it's a bad season." She said, "Yeah, but that's really late to get it. You got it really late." So that made me think like maybe it's too late to get it. And the only reason I'm mentioning it is that it's been mentioned in our chat. Is it now really just too late to get the vaccines that I got, or is it still not such a bad idea?
No, for flu, I still think it's a good idea. I mean, we are still at this peak in the country, but I looked at the LA wastewater data recently for flu, and we seem to have peaked a little bit in LA. But just remember, just because the peak is coming down, there's still a lot of infections that are going to happen on the downslope. And then you also have to remember, primarily what we've seen, 92% of the serotyping of the flu virus that's been done is flu A, and so flu B typically happens now through the spring, and so it's still really important. And one thing I want to mention, looking at the Southern Hemisphere data from South America, Australia, and New Zealand, The protection against severe illness usually is around 40% with the flu vaccine. This year it's dipped to about 35 just because sometimes when they choose the vaccine strains, it's not 100% match. But you have to remember that, that 35% protection against severe illness and hospitalization is still, that's not insignificant at all.
Sure.
And,
Sure.
the flu could change. The current prevalent strain could change over the next few months. And so the vaccine could still protect you, especially if it switches over to flu B, which it typically does.
Wow. Great stuff in this visit. Thank you, Dr. Michael Daignault. I look forward to our next visit.
Thank you for having me again. Yeah, let's do it again.
Of course, for sure. Dr. D, everybody. We are 90 seconds away from the Pulitzer Prize winner who joins us every Tuesday, David Cay Johnston.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Who's Mark Thompson?
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
What can you tell us about the scene?
Oh, my God.
Oh, girl, baby girl. Don't even play.
We could try ignoring it, sir.
Would you like to apologize for what you've done?
And I wanted to apologize to the Asian community, the Asian American community.
I misspoke. My bad. I'm sorry.
Y'all can all go to hell, and I'm going back to Texas.
That's not fake. That's real.
You just don't get it, do you? You don't.
You get nothing. Seriously, what the
I love it when you're angry.
Can you let him finish, sir?
They do this to me all the time. I don't know what the hell they do it for.
There's never been anything like this.
Girl, you just moved.
Who is having that conversation?
Have you ever been a member of the Chinese Communist Party?
Where are my weed smokers at?
Your Honor, I'd like to ask for a recess.
They pay me a lot of money for having attitude.
It's fantastic.
Right on, everybody. Thank you for being here. If you haven't yet, please smash the like button like a boss.
Smash
it helps
it
us
with
in
your
the
iron rod.
Yeah, smash it with your iron rod. It is the YouTube thing. It helps to get thumbs up and all that sort of thing as we close in on 100,000 subscribers. Thank you for subscribing. One of the jewels of this show is the opportunity that we all have to get the knowledge and interaction that we have with a Pulitzer Prize winner, a multiple best-selling author. He's written extensively about Donald Trump, but even in some of other writings from David Cay Johnston, he's written about the wealthy class and the way the wealthy class exploits the tax system. And I feel that's super relevant right now as well, as they are even more aggressively going after that tax system. So he is now a professor at RIT, and I'd love a warm welcome for David Cay Johnston.
Hello, Mark.
Hello, sir. Boy, I've got so much to ask you about. And the first thing, which may not be the most important thing, but it is the first thing, because I haven't touched on it at all today, is about the attack on the media that's been expressed by Elon Musk. And you've talked to us before about the free press and about this cherished aspect of American democracy. The grabbing of the information is one of the first priorities of a rising authoritarian.
Right.
And what Elon Musk is doing now is looking for a massive crackdown on free speech. Again, Trump's gone after CBS and the 60 Minutes thing, also ABC and the Stephanopoulos thing. Speak to what's happening with Elon Musk and how he wants to take down free speech and the media.
So Elon Musk said that CBS, presumably meaning people at CBS and specifically at 60 Minutes, should serve long prison sentences. And what's this about? Well, 60 Minutes did an interview with Kamala Harris. They would have done one with Donald Trump, but he wouldn't sit down with them. And Trump accused CBS of manipulating the edits to take answers from one question and apply them to another to hurt him, and filed a lawsuit demanding $10 billion in damages. Of course, since he won election, it's a little hard to understand why he suffered any damages. The FCC appointee of Donald Trump insisted that the transcripts be handed over. So CBS said, sure. And they gave over the transcripts, which show absolutely nothing improper happened. This was a perfectly normal television edit, and the transcript shows that Donald's complaint's bogus. So what follows is, number one, Donald says, oh, I'm suing you not for $10 billion, but for $20 billion for over an election he won. And then Elon Musk says long prison sentences. The intention here is very clear. It's to try and intimidate journalists into only towing the line. The Associated Press refers to the Gulf of Mexico by its proper name, the Gulf of Mexico. As a result, they are barred from the White House and from Air Force One. This is the major American shared news service that they're doing this to. And the President of the United States does not have the authority to change geographic names. There is a U.S. board which he controls, and they've voted for the name change. But there are two international boards, one under the UN and one in the cartographic world, that have changed this. And I posted on my Facebook page something my son Andrew, always playful, even in his 50s, Andrew sent me. It's a map of where he and I grew up around Santa Cruz that renames Monterey Bay the Gulf of Santa Cruz, or some wags have said, well, it should be the Bay of Santa Cruz. But, you know, we can go call things by all sorts of crazy names, but that doesn't make that it's correct. And authoritarians want incorrectness. They don't want you to know the history. Remember George Smith, the principal figure in George Orwell's 1984. What was his job? It was to, oh, here's a news article from the past. We don't like it. You rewrite the article and change the archive so that people don't know, so that the three big countries can continue their war and picking the pockets of the ordinary people.
By going after these news organizations this way, it's a shakedown, right? The money is a shakedown.
Yes.
But the Musk jailing of them, that imprisoning of them, does up that ante. And David, you probably didn't even need to do that because you, as Donald Trump, have control over various merger regulatory green lights that they're looking for from government. Right. They don't want to get on your bad side anyway.
Right. Well, the reason that I think you saw Jeff Bezos, Dr. Patrick Xiansheng, who owns the Los Angeles Times, and others bow to Donald Trump is because they have other commercial interests. If you're the owner of the LA Times, your primary business is pharmaceuticals. And of course, the FDA can delay or not approve, or they can give you a green light. If you're Jeff Bezos, you have contracts with the Postal Service to deliver goods. Contracts, Donald insists, lose money, but they've been studied and restudied, and they don't. They're perfectly reasonable and fair contracts, but that doesn't matter. And at the same time, Elon Musk is someone who should have no credibility whatsoever for many reasons, but here's one of the best ones. Elon Musk has sold millions of Americans, including a lot of them who've been writing to me electronically, that billions and billions of Social Security money is going to people who were born 150 years ago. Well, that's certainly what should upset people. Here's the problem. To make sure that bogus payments don't go out, if the Social Security Administration cannot definitively establish your birth date, they put in an 1875 birth date, and the computers are coded to not make a payment. So they took a very effective and inexpensive internal control to safeguard your tax money and turn it into a massive claim of fraud. And this goes right to the heart of how corrupt, dishonest, and uncaring about facts or truth these people are.
What is the long game at the Social Security Administration? I reported in the first half hour that the acting head stepped down, tried to push back. I mean, again, as I noted, you know, you can count on a woman to finally try to push back against this guy, Elon Musk, and say, no, you're not getting into this most sensitive information as it pertains to Americans. In any case, she had to step down. Now there is a new interim head, and then, of course, Trump has someone in waiting. What is the long game at SSA?
Well, you know, Mark, if you and I had gone to the Hollywood studios a couple of years ago and said, we got a great idea for a movie. The richest man in the world with no elective office is going to end humanitarian aid to the poorest people in the world so the children die of starvation and people with serious diseases come back. And then he's going to try and take away the Social Security money, which lifts enormous numbers of Americans out of poverty. Take Social Security away. For me, it hurts, but take it away from most Americans, they will be sunk into deep poverty. And it's the richest man in the world doing this. And I can tell you exactly what we'd be told by the people at the movie studios. That's such a crazy idea. No one would believe it. That's exactly what's going on here. You know, the problem with people like Elon Musk is they never have enough. It doesn't matter how much you have. If you're Donald Trump and you're an empty vessel inside because of the horrible way you were raised, you try to fill that with adulation, flattery, and money, or the belief you have money, whether you actually have it or not. And there is no end to that. There is no reasonableness to it. And you end up in a completely immoral situation.
And so is there a self-enrichment associated with shutting down SSA? Is it part of the privatization that we saw hinted from the younger Bush? I mean, I don't know what the game is here.
On the margin, I don't think another $1 billion or $10 billion means anything to Elon Musk. This is about power and ego, and I know better than you do. I mean, one of the central elements of Donald that I quickly caught on to back in the 1980s is he really does believe that he's special and that everybody else is an idiot. They don't know what they're doing. Only he knows. And because he lives in this fictional world in his head, because he creates his own reality, and he gets people to follow him, he can do that. I mean, that was the great insight of the Yale psychiatry professor, Bandy Lee, before she was fired. She had studied how cults work and belief systems. And what she showed was that, well, it's not infectious like a virus. The mental illness of a leader can be transferred to the followers. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing people. I was on local radio here in Rochester, New York, on the public station a week ago, and a guy came on and said, "We're going to have the best 4 years ever," you know, and no set of facts would permeate his belief system to the point where he finally said, "I don't care what that guy says. I won't believe anything he says." Well, that's the problem. If your mind is closed, you know, then it's like trying to talk to a cult member. And this will only change when the economic damage to these folks really gets severe. I've rewatched now a couple of times one of the many interviews on the internet of someone who's asked about Trump and what they think of him, and this woman praises him, and she's asked about the Affordable Care Act. What if it went away? And she goes, "Oh, no. I mean, I'm a single mother with 3 children, and one of them has this medical issue, and I desperately need that. No, they're not going to do that." And then the interviewer says, "Well, what about Obamacare?" "Oh, I have to get rid of Obamacare." And every one of these videos has a very interesting characteristic. There are basically 2 responses. Either, "Oh, I didn't know that." That's the uncommon response. The common response is, "You're a liar. You're just lying." So if you don't have any reality to things, it's amazing what you can do. And Musk and Trump's game is power, absolute power.
The interesting thing about the press conference that we saw where he brought his child into the Oval Office and kind of had a co-press conference. And by the way, David, I had this thought at the time. I don't mean to be so pro-woman today, but it kind of angers me that we've had this masculine flex at the governmental level. And if any woman who was an assistant to the president had brought her kid, her toddler, into the Oval Office,
Fox News would be going crazy.
Exactly. It was just, but we let Musk get a pass, A, because he's rich as hell, and B, because he's a dude. That's what happened there. I mean, there's no way that would be permitted if it was a woman.
You know, Donald's 3 older children all denounced him, one of them in a book, after he divorced Ivana, their mother. And then they all came back because they found out that nobody could pay them like Daddy, and nobody in corporate America was going to pay them the way Daddy would take care of them. But notice that the little boy, who's 4 years old, I understand, goes over toward Donald Trump, and he turns away and turns all stiff, because that's who he is. Years ago, I found out from a crew that did a promotional film with Donald and his second wife, Marla Maples, that Marla needed to adjust her strapless dress. And she started to hand the baby Tiffany to Donald, who leaped back and said, "What are you doing?" I mean, it's a man who's never changed a diaper. I didn't change nearly as many as I should have in my 8 kids, but I changed a lot of diapers. Donald's never changed it. He couldn't imagine doing something like that. And Donald has no empathy and no compassion is demonstrated by when he turns away from that kid and gets a scowl on his face. Now, here's the question I've been thinking about. Donald Trump doesn't like to be outshined. He was outshined in that press conference. Time magazine put Musk behind the desk, in the Resolute desk. Lots of people, not just me, have referred to Musk as the de facto president. And Donald hasn't turned on him. There is one likely explanation for which, let me be clear, I'm just going from 37 years of experience on Donald. Donald is somehow in hock to Elon Musk. Donald has not filed his mandatory Office of Government Ethics statement of all of his assets, income, and liabilities. It's not there. I just looked yesterday, so maybe it got filed today, but I doubt it. He's trying to end these filings, by the way. And he owes roughly $600 million, including interest, in the 2 New York civil cases, one in federal court with E. Jean Carroll, one in state court with the state over his corrupt behavior and dishonest behavior. He doesn't have that kind of money. But frankly, well, it wouldn't be pocket change. It would be a minor annoyance to Elon Musk. And so I suspect there's some understanding between them that has Donald in hock to Elon Musk. It certainly would absolutely explain what's going on between them. Yeah, there's, for those not watching on TV, the Time magazine cover with Elon Musk at the Resolute desk.
Yeah, there it is. Tony's got it up there. It's interesting. I was going to mention that in his sit down with Sean Hannity, we ran it the other day. Remember, Tony, the sit down with Sean Hannity. Hannity does almost like a 40 or 45 second, maybe even longer ramp up, describing how the media is trying to draw the two together in some kind of pitched battle, kind of talking about a divorce, talking about the fact that there's hostility between them. I don't know if you can find it, Tony.
Trying to drive a wedge between them.
Right. And it was as though they wanted to acknowledge it. Here it is. But just it's not long. Just
This is the picture. I can't find the video. So
okay. Anyway,
at least the picture.
But it was almost a tip of the hat to that. It was a way, I thought, of taking the buzz out of that story. Hannity was trying to do them both a favor, you know?
Yeah. Well, Hannity often tries to do them a favor, and a few times he's fed Donald lines that could have saved him a lot of grief, and Donald doesn't get it, which tells you how unsophisticated he is as a thinker. He has some sort of fundamental core ideas, and that's the end of it.
But you know,
he's had nobody who's more of a friend in the news business than Sean Hannity.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, I'm sorry. Sean Hannity's in the entertainment business, except when he wants to say he's in the news business.
That's right. It's a convenient out for him. Now let me get to the IRS. An IRS employee who is with Doge is apparently seeking access to the IRS system, and it is now fairly apparent that Doge will now be all over the IRS and taxpayer accounts. Can you speak to that, please?
Well, the claim is that they're looking for people who are cheating the government out of huge fortunes. The IRS is incredibly tightly regulated inside. I covered the IRS for the 13 years I was at the New York Times. And the systems they're getting into are very tightly controlled. IRS commissioners and deputy commissioners don't have access to that system. And the system has controls on it so that we've had in the past cases of where people go, well, let's look up this famous actress or porn star's tax returns. You get caught if you do that right away because the computer knows that you have certain files you're allowed to get into. And if you go outside of those files, literally immediately, there will be people at your desk asking you what's going on here. And I've written about some people who had trouble because of this. In one case, I didn't write about this one because it got resolved, but they had simply made a mistaken keystroke, and the Social Security number they entered was for somebody they were connected to. It wasn't a famous person or something else. They got that settled. But why in the world would a non-government employee with no security clearance acting on behalf of an imaginary government office, DOGE, it's just a fiction, it doesn't exist except in the minds of Donald Trump and Elon Musk, have access to this sensitive information, so sensitive that Donald Trump was furious about my getting the front 2 pages of his tax return, he said anyway, because I think he's the one who sent them to me. And there's this constant IRS secrecy business going on. Now, let me give you the dark vision of this. They're also trying to have access to the complete Treasury payment system. Well, Donald Trump has a roughly $70 million tax refund that has been tied up for years. That's the reason he used as an excuse for not releasing his tax returns, even though once you filed your tax return, releasing them changes nothing. There's no reason, if you're going to do it, not to do that. If you have the IRS internal records and you have the payment records over at Treasury, Donald could get his refund paid out to him. He could have money paid out to friends and supporters of his who may have money tied up somehow at the IRS because it's under audit or other review. Furthermore, in criminal cases, once outsiders have had access to this, just imagine for a moment you're a tax criminal defense lawyer and you're representing somebody who defense is Donald Trump's after me because he doesn't like my politics and I wouldn't bow down to him and he's claiming I'm a tax cheat. Your lawyer is going to say, Your Honor, we can't rely on these Internal Revenue Service records. They have been corrupted by outsiders getting access to them, and you shouldn't. The government shouldn't be allowed, Donald Trump's Justice Department, to use them to prosecute me.
Wow.
And things like that. So,
wow.
You know, and the claim we're going to find tax fraud by looking at those records. No, that's not how you find tax fraud. And these people aren't auditors. They don't know how to conduct audits. They have no idea.
This is exactly what I said about them just in general. I mean, this department that, as you suggested, is completely imaginary, but has been granted all of this not imaginary access to all of these government organizations. They are not people with administrative or managerial backgrounds. They're not accountants. They're in no position to evaluate waste, fraud, and abuse. We all want to get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse, but they've gone after, just as an aside, departments that aren't really typified by a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse. But, you know.
And AID is like one of the best examples of that. I mentioned last week that, you know, there are times when humanitarian aid workers have to pay off cash to warlords to get food and medicine through to people. But, you know, there are Inspector General reports on AID going back a long time. There's no finding of any corruption or wrongdoing there. And what we're getting from Elon Musk and his minions and Donald Trump, arguably one of his minions, is, oh, we found massive fraud and abuse. Well, really, where are they? You know, let's name some names. Let's produce things. If somebody who's 150 years old is getting a Social Security check, dead people have no libel and slander rights. Put their name out there in the public record. And of course, they can't because it's all lies. But that's one of the crucial elements in setting up a dictatorship. And on Saturday night, Donald Trump wrote something that just stop for a minute and imagine this. Imagine that a president of the United States, whoever it is, declared himself to have dictatorial power. Think about the next day's headlines in the LA Times and the New York Times and the Washington Post and the Keokuk, Iowa, whatever it's called. You know, president proclaims himself dictator. So Donald Trump wrote that anything he does to save the country, it can't be contrary to law. Very simple, short sentence. There's no fudge room in it. He declared he has dictatorial powers. So what are the headlines on the front page of our major newspapers? Oh, well, what does this mean? We're unsure. It seems alarming, but it's not completely clear because he didn't say more. And it's like, what is wrong with my peers that they don't? Yeah, he who saves this country does not violate the law. First of all, that is a quote wrongly attributed to both Napoleon Bonaparte and, I presume wrongly, to Donald's, as he calls him, second father, the notorious lawyer Roy Cohn from the McCarthy era. But just that
By the
misses
way, wait,
sort of.
stop for a second, because that's fascinating. I always thought that was a Napoleon quote. It's not?
No, apparently there's no record of Napoleon Bonaparte having said this. And of course, he did declare himself dictator, right? I'm going to have the people put my crown
Emperor,
on my
actually,
head.
yeah, right.
And went to prison. And Roy Cohn reportedly said the same thing to Donald Trump. And this is a clear, unquestionable, indisputable assertion of dictatorial power. And this goes to how my peers, who I've been trying and utterly failed, absolutely failed, for almost 10 years now, to say, you don't understand who you're covering. This isn't a politician who's different. This man is a criminal. He's the third generation head of a 4-generation white-collar crime family. He's crazy. You know, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He makes things up. I mean, if he weren't president of the United States, I would say he has delusions of grandeur. A little hard to make that argument since he's in the White House. But absent that, he has delusions of grandeur. And he's mentally ill. And as Bandy Lee, you know, who I was her only publisher for about 6.5 or 7 years, nobody would touch Bandy Lee. She said, Donald Trump is mentally ill, and he's got all these followers who are buying into his mental illness. And I think
she's the doctor, the psychiatric mind.
At Yale.
Kind of, from Yale, exactly.
Yeah, and I think Bandy's been vindicated about that. And frankly, I think I've been vindicated when I've been telling people for all these years, Donald wants to be our dictator. He's now declared his dictatorial authority.
He's working from the playbook that you foretold in so many different ways. I wanted to quickly get your reaction to what's happening on the existence of Doge and the power of Doge. So the judge is going to rule today. I don't know if is the ruling. I've been doing the show and Kim's not here today. So, but 13 states were trying to block Musk and the government downsizing team, the Doge team, and the Tanya Chutkan U.S. District Judge is going to hear and is hearing the case. Actually heard it yesterday, even though it was a federal holiday, and it was an emergency request by the Democratic state attorneys general. But so this would block Doge, just to be clear. But it's now suggested that she may not intercede, that she may likely be reluctant to intercede here, which would be the green light for Doge to go to run amok further.
There's another federal judge in another case who has said that Trump can go ahead with digging into the records of the education department, which include if you're a parent or grandparent who's signed for, or your kid has gotten Pell Grants, all your financial information. And that judge has said they may proceed. And here's the problem with that. These people are not vetted government employees. For all we know, and I want to be very clear, I'm just giving an example here. I'm not asserting that this is the case, but for all we know, they could be Russian or Chinese communist agents. They could be career criminals, or in the thrall of career criminals. Maybe they owe money because they have gambling debts or something. No way do these private individuals for a fictional agency have or should have any access to this confidential information. And listen, it's not like I'm suggesting we shouldn't look for fraud, waste, and abuse. I mean, I've been exposing that since I was a teenager in Santa Cruz. My whole career, a lot of it's been about exactly that, showing misuse of funds. That's not what's going on here. They're not looking for funds. They're looking to nakedly grab power, misinform people, and make assertions for which they have no factual backup, or at least are unwilling to issue any.
Well, the aggressive way in which they're slashing and dismantling various programs, there's been clearly a kind of abandon about it that has been so reckless. It has it doesn't pertain in the least. It has no adherence to a kind of examination of how efficient a program is, or if there's fraud, waste, and abuse. Witness the fact that they offered all of these early retirements to people across the board. I mean, you can't tell me across the board all those people should be getting early retirements. They're dismissing people who have distinguished records of service. It's an outrage. It really is.
Whom we as taxpayers have spent a fortune developing these people. Whether they're in military officers, diplomats, scientists, managers, we have huge investments in these people, and they're just swinging a meat axe that is going to do serious damage to us. And the one we really need to worry about is there are really deadly viruses out there, far more dangerous than COVID-19. The Middle East respiratory syndrome killed 1 out of 3 people who got it. 1 out of 3. We have corralled Marburg, MERS, and other viruses through USAID. We provide antiviral medications to people who are still alive, suppressing the virus in their bodies. We, in some cases, feed these people and help them in other ways so they don't travel and run the risk of exposing us. Now that we've cut off these medicines abruptly with no warning, those diseases are going to surge in the bodies of those people. It's going to spread to other people. And as soon as anyone who has that virus gets on one jetliner, this will start hopscotching all over the planet, just like COVID did. And we could have them right here in America. Donald doesn't understand any of that. If I could get Donald to sit down with me again and calmly try to explain this to him, he wouldn't get it because he doesn't learn, and he certainly doesn't learn at his age now. He sticks to this. It's just like when he says China and Mexico and Canada are going to pay the tariffs, and he doesn't understand that no, consumers will not only pay the tariff, they'll pay the higher prices on competitively made American goods.
Well, you know, to be fair to Trump, which is an odd thing for me to say, but you're president. And you have assigned such a thing to people who presumably have knowledge of, in this case, you know, a growing pandemic or whatever it may be. And sadly, in this case, it's at HHS, it's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. So he's put into place people who are of, to be kind, questionable competence. I mean, maybe
That's very, very polite of you.
To be blunt, I mean, incompetent. And we're seeing it play out. I mean, even their corrupt intent is being blown up all over the place. It's just such a mess.
Right. It is. I mean, we really are in very serious trouble, unfortunately, until it starts to really hit some of his followers, the poorly educated he loves, in ways that affect them, and hit business owners, small business owners. I had a senior Democrat in Congress tell me that he's had Republicans come to him and say, you know, I mean, I can't speak up against Donald, but I've got all these people in my district who are saying that they're going to suffer horribly from what he's doing. You know, there must be something we can do. And the Republicans are hoping the Democrats are going to bail them out on things like federal spending and the debt ceiling. And I suspect the Democrats are going to say, I'm sorry, you know, that's your kettle of fish. We've told you what we think is appropriate. But we're not voting to bail you out. We're really in a problem here. And let me just, one other thing wasn't on our agenda to talk about. I just posted at my Facebook page and on B-Sky a Polish newspaper article, English version of their article. We have so damaged the Russian military without a single American being involved that more than half of Russia's war-making capacity is destroyed. They only have about 1 in 6 to 1 in 10 of the trucks they need on the front just to move things around. Russian and North Korean soldiers are dying at the rate of 1,500 to 1,600 a day. In World War II, with wars in the 2 theaters, we only lost 300 people a day. They're losing 5 times that much. Well, the Russian army now depends on donkey carts to deliver ammunition, food, replacement parts, etc. And the Russian ministry is defending this, saying, well, armies have always used donkey carts. You know, yeah, well, we used to have a cavalry too that rode on horses. And it indicates how really awful the situation is for Vladimir Putin and his collapsed economy. And yet Donald Trump's minions now are meeting in Saudi Arabia, where the U.S. and Russia are now, as the New York Times just put as its lead story on the online front page, suddenly becoming partners after decades of hostility. And they are going to decide, we and the Russians, what's going to happen to Ukraine. Ukraine isn't even invited to the meetings. This isn't a peace talk. This is a how will we force Ukraine to submit talk.
That's exactly right. And Tony, find that there's a picture actually of them meeting in Saudi Arabia to decide the fate of Ukraine without Ukraine at the table. Let me ask you, just as a follow-up to that, David, do you think Europe? I've heard that Europe may form their own coalition to support Ukraine because they're very threatened by Russian expansion, of course.
Yeah, the Europeans all understand, and I've been there a number of times now in the last 2 years, that they are threatened by Putin. And this is Putin's own words. You don't have to know some skullduggery. He's said many times what he intends to do, and he's been consistent about it. So the British have just said, revealed that they don't have sufficient military capacity to both defend Estonia, which they're required to do under some treaty I was unaware of, and provide troops in Ukraine, but there, if necessary, are going to send troops to Ukraine. The Germans, the Poles, the Germans, the Danes, the French all have made it clear that they have to do something about Putin and Ukraine. And if they do it at their expense instead of ours, well, that's sort of a good thing for us. It also means we will have far less influence in the future going forward. But to allow Vladimir Putin to be rewarded for his illegal aggression, remember, Russia had signed a treaty with Ukraine in 1993. We will never, ever, ever enter your borders. And look what's happened. So if that succeeds, if Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin succeed in forcing Ukraine to give up about a fifth of its land, you think President Xi in China isn't going to be emboldened to invade Taiwan, to impose his full will on Tibet, to build even more islands in the South China Sea, like the Spratly Islands additions, and say, you can't go through this territory anymore in your ship without our permission because it's no longer open ocean. This is
well, that's
disastrous.
Really provocative. You know, David, I see China as something that at least Trump has articulated is a priority for him. You know, there's an adversarial relationship that he really has spoken to often when it comes to China. And I don't mean to suggest that he's underpinned by any kind of coherent strategy or understanding of the world, but I'm just saying that he's mentioned that before. So I'd wonder what his reaction is. I'm sure he can be bought off in whatever his view is of China. But
you're talking about Donald can be bought off.
Yes, that's right. Donald can be bought off.
She is a very sophisticated, highly educated man.
Oh, no, not Xi. No, I'm talking about Trump, who doesn't have any kind of, as I'm saying, his view of the world is not underpinned by anything at all.
There's no principles there.
Right. I've got to let you go. I've already taken way too much advantage. It's great to talk to you. And I look, there it is, the Gulf of Santa Cruz.
Andy, my son Andy, who's a truck driver in Albuquerque, will be very glad when I tell him that you put this up there.
I love it. What up, Andy? Thank you. Thanks, David Cay Johnston.
Take care.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
We'll talk again. Yeah.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Who's Mark Thompson?
It's unbelievably offensive.
Put up your pants, my man. Pull up those pants.
Envy wonton killing. I don't know what a wonton killing is. I'm gonna have to look that one up.
I was fortunate. Everyone I worked with made me better at my job.
I come from regular stock.
Liar, liar, your pants are on fire!
You are a cover-up artist and you are a liar.
We'll do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live.
We could try ignoring it, sir.
My words upset so many people.
Can you let him finish, sir?
I love it when you're angry.
What up, everybody? Always so cool to talk to David Cay Johnston. I put that up there, Tony, the Social Security thing that I had sent you earlier, because I meant to mention it to David, and the Inspector General audit, this one we were talking about Social Security and the fact that, he's going after, and Musk and the Doge folk are going after organizations that are incredibly efficient. I mean, there's always inefficiency, but look at this. The Inspector General audit from 2015 to 2022, Social Security sent out $71.8 billion in improper payments, most of which were overpayments, out of $8.6 trillion in benefits. That's an error rate of 0.84%, less than 1%. So when you talk, SSA issues over $1 trillion in benefit payments annually. Even the slightest error in the overall payment process can result in billions of dollars in improper payments. For example, from 2015 through 2022, SSA paid almost $8.6 trillion in benefits and made approximately $71.8 billion. Again, that 0.84% in improper payments, most of which were overpayments. These audits show you that SSA is an incredibly efficient government organization. The idea that you would go after the Social Security Administration is laughable, literally. It is laughable that you would go after USAID. That's not to say that every program in all of these different organizations is sacrosanct. But the kind of recklessness that Doge is going after American government with is despicable. So when you look at SSA, IRS is the same story. I told you at the beginning of the show, the IRS is one of the great revenue streams for this country. Of course they're going after the IRS. Of course they're going to dismiss people at the IRS at the highest levels, just like they did in the first Trump administration. They fired a bunch of people who were involved in what at the IRS? Remember? White-collar crime. They went after those who were investigating high net worth individuals. That's what they're doing again, because they're high net worth individuals. It's the oligarch. It's the plutocrats. They've taken over. And by the way, again, I'm not against rich people. We all want to be rich. I'd love to be able to fly everybody watching right here to some island for a wonderful week of discussing politics and all, and I'll pick up the tab because I'm wealthy. So I've got nothing against it. I'd love to be able to fund various charitable organizations because I've got nothing but dough. Nothing about being rich is necessarily bad. But when you game the system so that you don't have to pay back in a system that has given you so much, yeah, that's loathsome. I'm not cool with that. So I'm wanting to, I'll read some comments here in a second. And I also want to mention, if you want to reach us, you can always send me an email. It's themarkthompsonshow@gmail.com. It comes right to me. I'll read it, and we'll respond if I can. themarkthompsonshow@gmail.com. I also read all comments that come in after the show has aired on YouTube. So if you're watching on YouTube, or if you're listening across iHeartRadio, across Spotify, across the Apple Podcasts, of course, Google Podcasts, all the different ways that we go out as an audio podcast, if you have a comment, jump to YouTube, leave it in YouTube, and I will see it and try to respond, or at least I'll digest it. I will not ignore it. themarkthompsonshow@gmail.com is our address. We are a crowd-funded show, so I appreciate you joining our Patreon and PayPal community. I will, before the end of the week, recognize some new PayPal folk. A lot of people like PayPal, and a lot of people like Patreon. But either way, if you go to, there it is, the website, themarkthompsonshow.com. You have to put the in there, otherwise you end up at a ventriloquist's website. He's a Christian ventriloquist, I think. So maybe someday we'll get him on. And his name's Mark Thompson also. So anyway, it's themarkthompsonshow.com. And you'll click Patreon or PayPal, and it'll go right to both those spots, or either one, and you can join the community that supports this show. And there are also clicks to Patreon or PayPal underneath this video and underneath all our videos. So thanks for everybody who thanks to everybody for the support that you've shown us. I really do appreciate it and love the interaction with our audience. I think it's the great improvement, I'll use that word, that we have on this platform. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
Hey, shout out to Southern California listeners and viewers. We found, Courtney and myself, my other half, Courtney, we found a plumbing service. This is the oddest thing that we're in love with. And we got a big plumbing job done, and we paid full price for it. So they didn't give us some exchange or we don't pay as much. I want you to know that. But we wanted to tell you about them, and they said, well, we'd like to come on your show, and we'll have a little sponsor. So if you know someone in Southern California, you must tell them about this service because we have a special offer through our show, and we love these plumbers. It's One Day Rooter and Plumbing, the number one day Rooter and Plumbing.com. And if you mention our show, you get 10% off any job, and you get an additional 5% off if you're senior, military, or first responders. They're licensed, insured, they're bonded, family-owned and operated. We love the job they did for us. And they did a big job, and you could barely tell they were here. And they showed us with cameras, and they were so very thorough. They have a lowest pricing, greatest quality guarantee. Trustworthy and reliable, LA and Orange County. And again, find them, contact them. They have an email address. It's info@onedayrouterandplumbing.com, or you can call them. 626-702-0202. There it is, 626-702-0202. Most of all, if you know somebody in Southern California, or you yourself are in LA County or Orange County, reach out to them. Again, the number one dayrouterandplumbing.com. We truly love these guys, and I know you will too. Bob and Josh are their names, okay? So you can tell them, Bob or Josh, that you heard about how good they were on the Mark Thompson Show, and you want them to come look at stuff. And, gas leaks, water leaks, whatever it might be, even if it's maintenance, grab this offer now. They were already the lowest price that we could find, and they tried to avoid doing certain things that would be more expensive. They said, we could do this way, we could avoid the costs, etc. They kind of will work with you. We were just so impressed with them. So onedayrouterandplumbing.com. Reach them, tell them you heard about it on the show, and again, if you know somebody in Southern California, tell them to take advantage of this offer. 10% off right out of the chute if you mention our show, and then 5% discounts additionally for seniors, military, and first responders. So that's
The Mark Thompson Show.
That's a little word about that. Mark, says Greg, Nixon's plumbers were looking for Goldwater's Southern Strategy Dixiecrats. Their assets, colluding with Roy Cohn's Red Scare program. Nixon was trying to get who owned the white nationalist JFK's service. You said a lot there, Greg, but those are different kinds of plumbers. I understand what you're saying. I quickly wanted to acknowledge Vivian Alshoa. She is an OG on this show. She gave us a $10 super sticker. Appreciate that. A big shout out to you. Greetings from Hawaii, says Multi-Stacker. What about Hawaii, baby? Sounds so good right now. What's the weather in Hawaii right now? Tony, what's the weather in Hawaii? I'll bet it's so nice. Oh, man. It is cold and snowy in parts of America, the contiguous American states, and in one part of America, it is nice, and that's Hawaii. Here it is. Tony's got it up there for you, 78 degrees and sunny.
Thanks, Tony.
Wow. Not bad. 78 is kind of like the perfect temperature. I could live with 78 every day.
I will say that does say 73% humidity.
It's tropical, Tony.
Yeah.
It's tropical. They get those.
Oh, I know.
They get those rainstorms every afternoon, or that's like Miami,
I went just last year. I can't stop thinking. I love that out there. It's so nice.
It is so great. Yeah. Is Musk going to give America's banking info to Russian hackers, asks Fred. Michael Cohen said 47, meaning Trump, admired Putin because he runs Russia like a company. Yeah, there's all of this BS about running a company and then running a country like a company. It's BS. The two are very different, obviously. But this is the question to your first part of your comment. Is Musk going to give America's banking information to Russian hacker? I mean, it's possible you could, in the Doge community, I'm just talking about the handful of guys in that SEAL Team 6 crew that is the bunch that Musk moved into USAID with. He's moved now into the Department of Education and now SSA, also the IRS. And he's moving through government with these kids who are looking at stuff. They haven't been vetted. We talked about it with David Cay Johnston. I mean, if they were offered an S pile of money, don't you think they would give up some information? They can do it as simply as sending it on a thumb drive. So I would say to you, and by the way, an S pile of money to you and me is not even what an S pile of money is to one of these kids. I just think there's so many vulnerabilities that it's disgusting that the Congress is DOA on this. Unbelievable. Get the flu shot, says Calvin Wong. Yeah, the flu is still real, and flu is still a problem. Don't forget the tuberculosis outfit. We did that. I believe I did a bunch of these. Oh, here is Sonara says, How to Die Like a Medieval Peasant by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Right. It is scary to see the reemergence of so many of these childhood illnesses that, were eradicated essentially by vaccine. And David Cay Johnston from Peter Newton, is the slashing of government just a massive replay of the Brombach experiment in Kansas? Well, this I'll put to the side, Peter. That's a big-brained question, and I'll put it to the side for David for next week, I promise. Wes gives us a $5 super sticker. Thank you, Wes. A $5 super sticker from John as well. How about it for John? How about it for Wes?
Big shout out.
Big shout out. The Gulf of a billionaire, the Gulf of billionaire apartheid. Yeah, let's start renaming. We'll keep the renaming going. Musk isn't going to shut down Social Security, says Randy. They are domestic terrorists, says Kalohe SF. I think they are domestic terrorists in a sense. I mean, they are governmental flamethrowers, and the goal is to dismantle government. That's absolutely true. We'll expand on that in the weeks ahead. I mean, but be clear. We've said that here. They want government to fail you. They want government to fail you because that's the idea. You can't count on government. And there are so many things that government does well, but they want to show you that government can't do things well. That's what the monarchists want. That's what the authoritarians want. There are all these different, this is kind of what I was saying at the beginning of the show. There are these different aspects of the coalition that has brought Trump to power, and they all have an interest in showing you that government doesn't work for you. And so dismantling government, hobbling it, going after the FAA, the EPA, all of these organizations that do everything from keep the water and air pure to keeping the skies safe, all of these things are associated with the effective work that government can do. But what they want to do is show you that government doesn't work for you. So they slash the crap out of it, and they make government dysfunctional. That's not to say that there aren't aspects of government that are dysfunctional. I get it. But when a major disaster hits, you don't call private industry. This is what government is for. And it goes way beyond that. But more than anything, they're trying to emphasize in American life day to day how government will fail you. And in that end, to that end, that's what Doge is doing. Cousin Erie says, quoting the movie Marnie, a child who doesn't get what it needs will become an adult who will take what they can get. Wow. I don't know the movie Marnie, but that's a really dark quote, and it's played out, isn't it? Thank you for the $5 super chat. From Depressed Canadian, thank you for a $10 super chat that says, isn't this cluelessness by the media willful? They pretend they can't see what we're all seeing simply out of fear. I think they are scared for the most part. I think that you're seeing major news organizations tap out ahead of time. We talked about the pre-surrender, and I suppose that this is what your comment is in regards to. It's scary because it is then incumbent on platforms like this one and different media platforms to get the word out, and I fear that they'll come after all the different media platforms. I mean, that's generally what happens during the rise of authoritarianism. Getting a hold of the information is key. I keep hearing, says Wes, people saying read-only access. Well, read-only access means you can't change data, but you can see it and steal it like a card skimmer. Yeah, also, it's BS. They don't have read-only access. In fact, they said it after there was a protest about them going into the Treasury system, right? The Treasury, they went into essentially the bowels of the Treasury where they're paying checks. We talked about it on the show many times, and we went into great detail on it. But the idea was that there was such shock and outrage over it that they then, a couple days later, said, no, they have read-only access, and there are only 2 of them with read-only access. But the reality is that prior to that, they hadn't had only read-only access. And by the way, I don't believe it was only read-only access anyway. I mean, they had gotten, in the first hour, they got everything they needed out of that. These guys are tech ninjas. So he goes in there to the Treasury Department and these other departments with them, and they get everything they need. And that's why that Social Security director who resigned ultimately pushed back on them. She resigned rather than be the person who would green light these kids from Doge going in and grabbing all of the sacred information, essentially, the most secret information from Americans who are in the Social Security Administration's systems. So absolutely just not true about the read-only access. Go read the comments on Fox's website. All of the magats are cheering for Doge. There's an aspect of owning the libs, which is associated with Musk and Doge, and it's amazing how, as the ship goes down, they just scream, we're owning the libs. You're not owning the libs, dude. It's not the libs alone. It's a self-own end of U.S. government as we've seen it. The plurality, the multiculturalism, the forum of ideas, it's all gone. I'd suggest to you, if you let these Doge people into all of these data sources from IRS to SSA to EPA to the Treasury Department, you've already abdicated as Congress. You've abdicated your control. You've let them slash these programs, dismantle entire programs, fire and offer buyouts to all of these people in a completely arbitrary way. You, as Congress, allowed that. You hold the power to establish these agencies, to fund these agencies. You have the power to go after staffing. You have the power to evaluate waste, fraud, and abuse. Maybe they can bring it to you. As Congress, you can evaluate that which is brought in by Doge or whatever imaginary department Trump wants to come up with. They can make recommendations to you as Congress, and you can act upon them. But you've completely given up that role. You're letting Doge/Trump/Musk change government for the foreseeable future. That is damning, really damning. Blue Spark, thank you for a $10 super sticker. Right on.
Big shout out.
Thank you, Blue Spark. Mackay, where's Mackay been? It's been ages. Mackay was an OG on this show early on. And I love the lab. It looks like an orange lab, or I can't tell what the dog is, but very cute thumbnail. Thank you. Or avatar, would that be, Tony? I guess it would be an avatar. $10 super sticker, and thank you for that. Two of them? Wow. I mean, I have to give him a big shout out.
Big shout out.
Thank you, Mackay. Appreciate that. Does OG meet old guy?
What?
Of course not. I would never call anybody on this show. Does OG mean old guy? Asked Harry Nash.
No.
No, it's original gangster, right? Isn't it? And finally, this. I'm just cold reading all of this stuff, so I'm sorry. Depressed Canadian says for a $10 super chat, although I have issues with the 2017 hashtag resistance movement against Trump 1.0, the current opposition is missing that solidarity, that meaning the solidarity from the 2017 resistance movement, because 2.0 is already much worse and we're just 1 month in. I would respectfully suggest it's not just about the resistance movement. In fact, in a way, it has nothing to do with the resistance movement. It has everything to do with the fact that they were poised and ready with a plan to overtake government. That's what Project 2025 was all about. So it's not really about the resistance, although, to be fair to your point, Depressed Canadian, you could say that we, the general resistance, or those who are the hashtag resistance, should have been ready also. You knew 2025 was coming, but here's the problem. You have no control of any lever of government. Now, what I've said to you before is, in a way that's incredibly crucial, of course, but in another way, you can do things as the minority party, and I've cited Tuberville and the way he held up all of those Biden appointments and Biden promotions for military officers, et cetera, for so long. You can do things as the minority party. And here's the last thing, and then we got to wrap up the show. There is a major moment coming, and it's about keeping the government open. And that is going to happen in March. It's only weeks away. And the Republicans are going to have to get their act together. Otherwise, the government's going to close down. And there are parts of the Republican Party that would like to see the government close down, right? But they will own a government shutdown. And if it isn't obvious already, as people from the Forest Service are dismissed already because of DOGE, people from the National Park Service are dismissed because of DOGE, how the Trump administration has fired the nuclear weapon maintenance people, how they have been so reckless, so incompetent, so brutal in their firings and dismissals. If it hasn't become obvious yet, shut down the government and see what happens. Careful what you wish for. All of you who are MAGA heads, I'm telling you, you're playing with a really dangerous situation. Government isn't all the venomous, awful, evil force that you think it is. And government working well is about a plurality of ideas, of people, of crafting a future. And you guys are just blowing it all up, and you don't care where it all lands. And when government closes, if you guys can't keep the government open, it's going to happen soon. We'll see what happens. So happy Easter, everybody. Tony, it's been so much fun. What do I need to do? Alfred Hitchcock's suspenseful sex mystery. Marty,
I never heard this one.
I'd never heard of it. Sean Connery and Tippi Hedren in it. Wow, that's great. Was it Harry who knew one of our...
There's the other poster.
Yeah. Wow, Marnie was an Alfred Hitchcock movie. Man, did I miss something in my pop culture references? Man.
Right?
Yeah. Jeff
This
says,
potential
I
would be
just
good.
sold my Meta and Amazon stocks and bonds out of my retirement account. No TSLA either. This is my protest, maybe to my detriment. Yeah, a lot of people are divesting. Oh, no Tesla either, meaning the Tesla stock.
I'm Shadow Stevens for the Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
I was going to buy Tony a Tesla, but then I decided it's protest.
Out of time. Bye-bye.
Not to. Thanks, everybody. Tomorrow, we'll see you then. Bye-bye.